This is the Aramark Heat Stress Prevention Safety Training. Next slide. Next slide. Purpose. The purpose of this standard is to protect associates subject to heat stress. The information in this plan will facilitate implementation of measures necessary to prevent heat-related illness. This plan was developed to comply with OSHA's General Duty Clause that states each employer shall furnish to each of his associates employment and a place of employment free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his associates. Procedures must be in place to control the effects of environmental factors that may contribute to heat-related illness. The most common factors are air temperature, humidity, radiant heat sources, and air circulation. Scope. This standard applies to all Aramark locations who have associates who work in or may be exposed to heat stress in the workplace. This standard also complies with California Occupational Safety, and the Health Standards Board has approved a heat illness prevention regulation which applies to all outdoor places of employment and requires the provision of shade, water, acclimatization, and training. Responsibilities. Management. Identify and maintain records of all tasks associates that are required to work outdoors where potential heat illness could occur. Require all affected associates receive proper training on heat illness prevention and comply with all appropriate procedures. Ensure that adequate water and shade are available at the site when the environmental risk factors for heat illness are present. Encourage associates to drink water frequently. Call 911 to request emergency medical services in the event medical assistance is required. Associates, awareness and compliance with all appropriate heat illness prevention procedures while performing assigned duties. For drinking adequate amounts of hydrating fluids when the environmental risk factors for heat illness are present. Ensure access to a shaded area is available to recover from heat-related symptoms. Inform their supervisor if shade and or water is inadequate. Report symptoms of heat-related illness promptly to their supervisor. Call 911 to request emergency medical services in the event medical assistance is required. Next slide. Procedures. The goal of Aramark's Heat Stress Prevention Standard is to use appropriate measures at each risk level to protect workers from heat-related illnesses. The chart below summarizes Aramark's approach and the protection of their associates. Heat stress prevention plan elements. Supplies. Ensuring adequate water provisions for rest areas and other supplies. Emergency planning and response. Preparing supervisors and crews for emergencies. Worker acclimatization. Generally increasing workloads, allowing more frequent breaks as workers adapt to the heat. Modified work schedules. Establish systems to enable adjustments to work schedules. Training. Preparing workers to recognize heat-related illness and preventative measures. Heat stress surveillance. Periodic inspections will be conducted to ensure associates are following safe work practices and not displaying symptoms of heat stress illness. It is an expectation that inspections occur more frequently the warmer that the work environment becomes. A heat index in the range of 80 degrees to 90 degrees requires inspections and observations every 2 hours. A heat index of 91 degrees or greater requires inspections and observations every hour. Supervisors must refer to the heat index table for a summary of risk levels and associated protective measures for detailed actions. Supervisors must ensure personal factors that contribute to heat-related illness are taken into consideration before assigning a task where there is the possibility of a heat-related illness occurring. The most common personal factors that can contribute to heat-related illness are age, weight and fitness, drug and alcohol use, and prior heat-related illness, etc. Control measures. The following elements of the Aramark Heat Stress Prevention Standard provide specific information for managers and supervisors to comply with regulatory standards and ensure the welfare of their associates. Water. Next slide. The most important preventative measure on a hot day is cool water consumption. Management must encourage associates to drink water 15 minutes before beginning work. Whenever environmental risk factors for heat illness exist, supervisors are responsible to ensure that clean, fresh, and cool potable water is readily available to associates. Supervisors must encourage associates to drink frequently. Associates must understand that thirst is not an effective indicator of a person's need for water, and it is recommended that individuals drink 1 quart of water or 4 8-ounce cups per hour when working in hot environments. Each location shall take one or more of the following steps to ensure associates have access to drinking water: provide access to drinking fountains, supply water cooler dispenser and single service cups, supply sealed one-time use water containers, for example, bottled water. Drinking water and water dispensers shall meet the following requirements. All sources of drinking water shall be potable and in a clean and sanitary condition. Drinking water must always be kept cool. When temperatures exceed 90 degrees, it is recommended that ice be provided to keep the water cool. Any container used to store or dispense drinking water shall be clearly marked as to the nature of its contents and shall not be used for any other purpose. Dipping or pouring drinking water from containers such as barrels, pails, or tanks is prohibited regardless of whether or not the containers are fitted with covers. The use of shared cups, glasses, or other vessels for drinking purposes is prohibited. Outlets for non-potable water shall be posted in a manner understandable to all associates that the water is unsafe for drinking. Sports drinks such as Gatorade or Squencher may be provided. If sports drinks are provided in barrel-style coolers, ensure these coolers are clean and in sanitary condition. Powdered drinks are permitted to be used. It is recommended that supervisors make clean ice available when possible. Ice cubes are better than crushed ice. Encourage associates to fill their water bottles with ice and water at each break. Ensure that food and drink bottles are not kept in the work area. Access to shade. Supervisors are responsible to ensure that associates have access to shaded areas. Shaded areas should be large enough to accommodate 25% of the associates on a shift and allow associates to sit in the shade without touching each other. The nearest shaded area must be as close as practical. Usually, this will mean that the shade must be reachable within a 2.5-minute walk, but in no case more than a quarter-mile or 5-minute walk. Canopies, umbrellas, or other temporary structures may be used to provide shade, provided they block direct sunlight. Next slide. Trees and dense vines can provide shade if the canopy of the trees is sufficiently dense to provide substantially complete blockage of direct sunlight. Areas shaded by artificial or mechanical means, such as by a pop-up canopy as opposed to trees, must provide means for associates to avoid contact with bare soil. The interior of a vehicle may be used to provide shade if the vehicle is air-conditioned and the air conditioner is operating. If the National Weather Service, as of 5 p.m. the previous day, forecasts the temperature to be over 85 degrees, shade structures must be available at the beginning of the shift and present throughout the day. Regardless of the predicted temperatures, supervisors must always have the capability to provide shade promptly if it is requested by an associate. If the temperature exceeds 90 degrees, shade must actually be present regardless of the previous day's predicted temperature high. Acclimatization. Supervisors are required to acclimatize associates and allow time to adapt when temperatures rise suddenly and associate risk for heat illness increase. Acclimatization may also be required for new associates working at temperatures to which they haven't been exposed for several weeks or longer, or associates assigned to new jobs in hot environments. Generally, about 4 to 14 days of daily heat exposure is needed for acclimatization. Heat acclimatization requires a minimum daily heat exposure of about 2 hours of work. Gradually increase the length of work each day until an appropriate schedule adapted to the required activity level for the work environment is achieved. This will allow the associate to acclimatize to conditions of heat while reducing the risks of heat illness. It should be noted that new associates are among those most at risk for suffering the consequences of inadequate acclimatization. Supervisors with new associates should be extra vigilant during the acclimatization period. and respond immediately to signs and symptoms of possible heat illness. When possible, supervisors should start work shifts earlier in the day and schedule strenuous work during the coolest time of the day or evening. Supervisors should remind associates to wear lightweight, loose-fitting, light-colored clothing when working in the heat or sun. When possible, supervisors must provide air circulation with fans, swamp coolers, and/or spot coolers. Preventative recovery periods. The purpose of the preventative recovery period is to reduce heat stress on the associate. The supervisor is required to provide access to shade for associates who believe they need a preventative recovery period from the effects of heat and for any who exhibit indications of heat illness. Access to shade must be allowed at all times, and associates must be allowed to remain in the shade for at least 5 minutes. The preventative recovery period is not a substitute for medical treatment. Next slide.